Mr. Brad Nelson against Michael Braverman. Both of these players playing Junk Aristocrats, as you can see. Brad yesterday going 3-1 in Standard with Junk Aristocrats, but 4-0 in Legacy, a format he's not really known for doing very well in. As you see, Braverman also going 3-1 in Standard and going 3-0-1 in Legacy. But a Junk Aristocrats mirror, this is probably going to get pretty convoluted, Matthias.
Yeah, well, we saw Brad play his Junk Aristocrats on camera yesterday. We actually saw his only loss. That was to Brian Bronduin playing Junk Reanimator. Brad actually able to win the other 3 rounds. This mirror, a pretty involved matchup. I would say, you know, with the experience Brad has with this deck, this is going to be a tough battle for Braverman.
Yeah, I think, you know, Nelson, being probably the best Junk Aristocrats player in the world, is going to make things pretty difficult here on Braverman, as Braverman's got a Scavenging Ooze, going to pass the turn back. Their lists do differ. You'll see Braverman does have Scavenging Ooze in his main deck, just one of them, where Nelson does not. You're also going to find some main deck Obsidian Ghost Councils here for Braverman, as you see Nelson play a Skirt Stack High Priest. So there are definitely some moving parts here between the two players and the differences between their lists. We'll see who's going to come out on top, because Braverman looks like he's going to play a Woodland Cemetery.
Well, one thing I know is that the Skurstag High Priest is very important in this mirror match.
Oh,
a lot of times the two decks are somewhat goldfishing against each other. Junk Aristocrats is not a deck known for very many removal spells. I mean, it has the Grooks and Tragic Slips, but otherwise, both players are just trying to present something powerful, and it's really hard to beat a 5/5 flyer when you're looking for something that's strong.
Yeah, it forces the hand of Braverman to have a removal spell before Nelson's able to start pumping out more of them. And if you remember Grand Prix Miami at all, when we watched Brad Nelson multiple times on camera there, a lot of the time he would play that High Priest, follow up with a Cartel Aristocrat and a Doomed Traveler to pump out a 5/5 right away, but just a more honest play in the form of Voice of Resurgence here.
Well, and this is the interesting part about Junk Aristocrats, is that the deck plays very fair up until the point where it stops playing fair.
Yes.
So we see here, you know, Braverman's board is a very innocuous. It's 2/2 and a 1/1. You know, Brad's board is a 1/2 and a 2/2, and then it'll probably stay like this until suddenly Brad will sacrifice things, you get a 4/4 token and a 5/5 flyer all in one turn.
Yeah,
and then
out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, yeah, you have these explosive plays. So really it's a race to who can assemble a board like that first.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you know, things just kind of explode, as you said, just out of nowhere. Normally, you know, you'll look at a board here, you see a Garruk Relentless here from Michael Braverman, see what that's going to fight, if it's going to take down the High Priest, maybe put out a Wolf token. But yeah, things do start off pretty innocuous, pretty honest, and then things get out of control, as now Garruk the Veil Cursed has shown up, and Skurstag High Priest is going to bite the dust.
Right, that's a pretty important play for Braverman. As mentioned before, Skurstag High Priest is one of the scariest cards in the mirror because of its ability to make the almost unanswerable 5/5 flyer. Not only did Braverman get to remove the High Priest, but the fact that he now has Garruk being able to sacrifice a Doom Traveler to perhaps find his own is really big here.
Now, one of the neat things that we didn't see yesterday at all, at least certainly while I was in the booth, is that, you know, Nelson, as he's going to play 2 copies of Blood Artist and get a Voice of Resurgence over there, is that he could actually have played his own Garruk there, because the new Legendary rule and the Planeswalker
the new Legendary rule is in effect, so it would not get rid of Garruk.
Yeah.
You have to attack it now.
He would have, you know, he could have fought, you know, who knows what, but instead you're just going to see 2 Blood Artists. Voice of Resurgence comes in, tries to kill Garruk, but the Doom Traveler's going to block, but 2 Blood Artist triggers, which I think is where Nelson is very happy to be right now. He's got Blood Artist superiority.
Yeah, well, multiple Blood Artists is certainly certainly the big threat in the mirror. We'll see what Michael finds to deal with that, because he has this Garruk the Veil Curse. That -1 ability is really more important than the +1 ability in this matchup, because of because that utility of finding, you know, either the Varolz or the Skurstag High Priest that you need in a specific situation is really important.
So you see Braverman's going to play a land, reorganize them. There's a Gavney Township hiding out in his hand right now as well, kind of hanging on to that one for a while. You see him keeping his green mana open for a Scavenging Ooze. He's going to play a Blood Artist of his own now. So we've got 3 Blood Artists on the table. Get your calculators ready, because these life totals are going to change a whole lot.
Well, Braverman's doing a really important thing by not playing that Gavney Township, because what he's doing is that he's messing with Brad's combat math.
Okay.
Right now, Brad has to feel like, you know, he feels that he's the only one with the Township, which is really important in a matchup where both players are playing 0/1s, 2/2s, you know, just flooding the board with small creatures. So when Braverman then hides that, you know, he's not going to play the Gavney Township until the turn he intends to use it, most likely.
You see Braverman's going to make a Wolf token, 1/1 Death Touch in play. Now you've got a Spirit token coming across from the Doom Traveler, going to knock Nelson down to 19, it looks like. As Nelson's going to untap, he's going to draw. Let's see what he can find, because I feel like he's a touch behind right now. Not terribly far behind, but he's still got some work to do to catch back up here.
Well, yeah, the other guy has a Planeswalker, and that's very important in this matchup because of just the sheer diversity of threats that it presents. You know, it can first of all, it can find whatever card it needs to find if there's a certain creature that Braverman needs in the situation, but also the -3 ability on Garrick, if the game board actually stalls out, will become pretty relevant.
So we see Nelson's going to play a Cartel Aristocrat here to get his turn started. The 2/2, that can sacrifice like crazy, going to make things difficult on Braverman. Now here's a Young Wolf. Nelson going to play a Godless Shrine tapped, and now he's got the necessary mana to be able to start activating Gavany Township moving forward, as we'll get a Scavenging Ooze activation, removing that Skirtstag High Priest, get a little bit stronger, gain a little bit of life. I think we'll see another activation here, removing that Doom Traveler. So Ooze going to move up to a 4/4, going to give Braverman some life, and now he's got a pretty difficult threat, but with the way that Junk Aristocrats gums up the ground, that thing could be huge, and it could block.
The bigger threat going on here is that Brad has a Cartel Aristocrat, 2 creatures with Undying or Pseudo-Undying, and 2 Blood Artists.
Yes.
That's Brad's real threat. Braverman actually, by growing his Scavenging Ooze, may have cost himself a little bit of options here. Now that ultimate on Garrick is not as much of a threat because he's clearing out all the graveyards.
It's true.
I mean, it's not, you know, you were saying that a 4/4 isn't all that different than a 2/2 in the matchup. It might be that he wanted to leave one creature there.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that happens with Garrick the Veil Curse, you think of the sacrifice ability, you think of the putting the 1/1 Death Touch into play, but you rarely ever see as here comes an Obsidian Ghost Council, probably going to change things in this game in a big way, but you rarely ever see the ultimate on Garrick the Veil Curse ever get used. So you bring up a very good point that the Ooze with the ultimate Garrick the Veil Curse a little bit backwards.
Yeah, I was surprised to see him take out his own Dooms Traveler for this reason. But I think what that tells me is that Braverman really has no intention of ending the game that way. He's just trying to get lots of value off this Garrick. He's trying to make more Death Touch Wolves and eventually township them.
So now here comes that Spirit Token in the air. Nelson going to take another point of damage. Obsidian going to leave play for now, as Nelson is going to say, hey, why don't you put that to the side instead of on top of your deck? Thank you very much.
It doesn't actually go there.
So now Nelson draws a card, and now he has drawn what looks to be a Garrick Relentless of his own.
And this will be the first time, at least for me, that I've seen, you know, the same Planeswalker face off against itself.
Likewise, we are both watching it for the very, very first time. He's going to fight Blood Artist.
And it's really important that he was able to get this Garrick down before Braverman started townshipping. In a lot of ways, it was really unfortunate for Braverman that his Garrick flipped to being the Veil Cursed, because then Brad was able to play out 2 Blood Artists.
Okay.
Because, you know, once Garrick flips, it's done fighting. And we see Brad is able to kill a Blood Artist, and now he's going to basically have a second removal spell next turn.
So you see Nelson does take down the Blood Artist. Some Blood Artist triggers will occur. Dust will settle. We'll have our life totals updated properly for you guys at home. As now Nelson's going to pass the turn back. No good attacks. Ooze going to move up a little bit more. Going to gain him a life. Young Wolf going to get sacrificed here. And I like how Nelson does this. He sacrifices Young Wolf while Braverman is tapped out, so he can get those Blood Artist triggers and get that Young Wolf a little bit bigger, so the Braverman can't remove it with Scavenging Ooze. So he's got a 2/2. But most importantly, you know, those Blood Artist triggers as well. So a nice, quick little play there by Nelson.
So soon we're going to get into the race of Gavany Townships. Brad certainly has the better creatures on the board, but Braverman does have the ability to continue making creatures with Garrick the Veil Cursed. It really still remains to be seen, I think, who wins this creature war.
All right, so Obsidian's going to come back in. A little drain, a little gain, life total switching. I would hate to have a pen and pad.
Yeah, they're going to need a lot of paper to continue to keep track of all the life total changes.
Yes, they are. As Braverman, it looks like he may have drawn a Voice of Resurgence.
I believe he did. With that voice, he has to be careful. He may not want to play it. I think it might cost him a Gavany Township activation to cast it this turn.
Yeah, he has a Voice Resurgence and a Skirtstag High Priest over there as well. Kind of a little scared to cast that Skirtstag High Priest when there's a Garrick Relentless out there, you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, the High Priest is still very important in the matchup. He would like to see Brad flip that Garrick and then play the Skirtstag High Priest.
See, Braverman reaching for that Spirit Token yet again. That's been the one consistent for him. That thing keeps coming into the red zone. Looks like he's going to do it one more time. But Matthias, as we see Braverman consider his attacks here, we look at a very gummed up board right now. And when you get into a situation like this is normally what happens in Limited, not in Constructed.
Right.
So when you're looking at this board here, what do you analyze? You know, if you're Braverman or Nelson, what are the most important cards on this board for both sides of the table?
Well, you have to think of things that, you know, a lot of ways creatures just trade. So punching through with either side, you have to think, okay, does one person have enough more creatures to punch through. Because the thing is that, you know, attacking is generally just a thing that favors the defender. So
Sure.
for someone to have a good attack, they usually have to have a pretty sizable advantage.
Sure.
It looks to me like neither player does. So then you start to think, what are the unanswerable things either player can do? Well, the things that you can't answer is, first of all, Obsidat's trigger is going to happen every turn. Brad doesn't really have an answer for that. On Braverman's side, Braverman has a Skursag High Priest. If he makes demon tokens, then Brad has trouble answering that. On the other side, he has a Scavenging Ooze, which I guess in theory is too big to answer, though considering the number of chump blockers, probably not very important. On Brad's side, really all he has going for him is that double Blood Artist.
I think that Cartel Aristocrat is a little bit scary, as now you're going to see Braverman search out a Blood Artist of his own, put that into play, sacrificing that Voice of Resurgence, getting a large Elemental token, and now Obsidat's going to go hiding yet again. But, you know, one of the things that gets difficult in a board stall like this, for lack of a better term, is trying to identify what's important and what's irrelevant. And I agree with you that the Blood Artists on Nelson's sides are problems A and B, and then trying to figure out, maybe how do I get rid of that Garrick Relentless? But on Braverman's side, that Garrick the Veil Curse is doing a lot of work right now.
Well, I really like that he found Blood Artist, because one of the things I thought the double Blood Artist was so important, because if Brad's up 2 Blood Artists to 0, he has the option to just attack his entire team when he wants to, and Braverman may not actually have any good blocks at that point, because if 10 creatures die in combat, which is actually possible here, then you know, that's Braverman's entire life total.
Yeah.
So Brad could use if you get Blood Artist advantage, you can use that to leverage your attacks.
So Nelson's going to draw his card. And now what's interesting here is that Braverman willingly searched out a Blood Artist, knowing that it can die. Yet again, because Nelson just killed a previous one. So
Right.
is he okay with that? You know, just continuously searching out Blood Artists for Nelson to kill so that the Garrick doesn't flip? Does it make Nelson make a decision on, hey, you want to kill my Blood Artist, or you want to kill my Skursag High Priest? You know, it really makes him make a decision at this point. A pretty interesting play there by Braverman.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can only activate Garrick once, so Brad is going to have to pick which of these two really big threats that Braverman has. You know, we identified that the High Priest and the Blood Artist were important, that Brad cannot kill both of them.
So Nelson's going to go after Blood Artist again, wants to make sure that he has Blood Artist superiority. He's going to play a Lingering Souls and flash it back. Now that might change some things in a big way here.
Yeah, that paired with the Blood Artist advantage, you know, just more creatures is really important. It also gives him a way to deal with this potential 5/5 that the High Priest is making.
Yeah. So now Nelson going to sacrifice a Spirit token to Cartel Aristocrat. We'll see what color of protection he's going to give it. Maybe we'll see another sacrifice, not quite sure. Blood Artist triggers are going to happen here. Is he going to be able to potentially fireball Braverman out here?
It's close. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
And the
7. Yeah, the answer is yes.
is yes. So Lingering Souls is actually the one that's going to get it done for Nelson. It's going to put him up a game over Michael Braverman. Braverman looked like he was in the driver's seat that game, or at least doing better than Nelson, but all it takes is one Cartel Aristocrat to get the sacrifice engine online. 2 Blood Artists certainly don't hurt, and Nelson wins game number 1 here of round 9.
Well, when you're up 2 Blood Artists, Lingering Souls in a lot of ways is an 8-point burn spell, which, you know, coupled with the cards that Brad had in play, actually managed to add up to Braverman's entire life total.
So we're going to take a look at the sideboards here of this Junk Aristocrat mirror. As you can see, when watching at home, games are going to get a little convoluted in this bad boy, but maybe we can find some things to make it a little easier. We'll go towards Braverman's first, and I'll let you take a look at that and see if he has anything useful over there.
Well, I think one thing we noticed here is that the lack of removal spells can really hurt both sides on this, in this matchup. We're thinking about things that needed to be removed. Well, first and foremost, Brad's Blood Artists really needed to be removed, and Braverman wasn't able to do that. He has 3 Abrupt Decays in his sideboard, which will probably all come in this matchup to hit those pivotal creatures. Also of note is an Abrupt Decay can hit a flipped Garrick, which, you know, is a little something you don't always think of, because you think of Garrick as being a 4-cost card. When it flips, it loses its mana cost.
Okay. Hey, how do we feel, because we take a look at Braverman's sideboard, he has 2 Scavenging Oozes in his sideboard to go with his 1 main deck. How do we feel about Scavenging Ooze in that last game?
Well, Scavenging Ooze was very unimpressive in the last game.
I felt the same way.
You know, even though it was a 4, say it was actually just a 4/4 for 2 mana, even that card by itself is still probably not very good in this matchup. Okay. There's just too many chump blockers, there's too many Doom Travelers, Young Wolves, Lingering Souls, even Cartel Aristocrats for that to be what matters. You know, it's not that hit you for 4, hit you for 4, hit you for 4 that wins this game. It's that I have 2 Blood Artists, hit you for 20. That really matters. So Scavenging Ooze, you'd have to really want its Graveyard Exiling ability to keep it in, and there's only a few cards that interacts with enough, I think, I don't think there's enough that makes you want to put in more, or even you might not even keep the ones you have.
And do you feel the same way about Obsidian Ghost Council, where we saw at that game basically being a 5/5 that drains Brad 2, drains Brad of 2 life, gains Braverman 2 life. He has an additional one in his sideboard to go with his 2 main deck, but again, I wasn't terribly impressed with the Ghost Council that game.
No, Braverman got a lot of things online which just were all trumped by Brad's Blood Artist engine, and I think Braverman even identified that in the matchup by how he was playing as Garrick, that really, despite the fact that he had all these good cards, his engine was able to be trumped. I think Obsidat suffers the same problem. There's only so many cards that Braverman can board out, and I think Obsidat's probably a fine man if you only, in the list of things I want to cut, it's probably not at the top, but if I had enough things to board in, it probably would get cut.
Okay, as we take a look at Nelson's sideboard here, 2 Appetite for Brains, 2 copies of Duress, an Obsidian Ghost Council of his own, 2 Slayer of the Wicked, 3 Abrupt Decay, 2 Scavenging Ooze, a War Priest of Thune, a Brave Revelation, and a Sin Collector. I think, of the cards that are mentioned here, I agree with you. Abrupt Decay is an easy inclusion. The rest are kind of up for debate.
Well, the interesting one that he has there is it depends how much Brad thinks that Blood Artist is important in this matchup. Okay. Blood Artist is a vampire, so Slayer of the Wicked can target Blood Artist.
Okay.
That's a pretty bold statement that you want to play a 3/2 just to take care of Blood Artist, but if Brad really believes that this is what the matchup is about, we might see him bring some of those in.
And if the last game is any indication, that's exactly what this matchup does seem to be about. So maybe we'll see 1 or 2 of those Slayer of the Wickeds come in from the sideboard. As if you guys are just joining us this morning, Cedric Phillips, Matthias Hunt, Star City Games Open Series featuring the Invitational here in New Jersey. Hopefully you do stay with us all day long. You can also interact with Matthias and I, and don't forget about Adrian Sullivan, Ruben Bressler, and Glenn Jones, the rest of the SCG Live crew on Twitter at SCG Live, hashtag SCGINVI for your tweets. Join the conversation all day long as we do work our way to a top 8 this weekend. See if we're going to have a defending champion in Jerry Thompson, currently sitting at 6-2. See if Adam Prozac can top 8 his 3rd Invitational in a row. He's leading the pack at 8-0. We'll see if Shaheen Cerrone, currently sitting at 5-3, can top 8 his 5th Invitational in a row. As Braverman is going to start off here with a Doomed Traveler. 5 is a lot.
5 is a lot of invitations.
Yes.
Yeah. All of them on the backs of blue, white, and black.
I think Shaheen probably has either the nicest or the most worn Glacial Fortresses in the world. So you're going to see Braverman get a little aggressive here. He's going to start off with a Doomed Traveler, gets in for 1, plays a Scavenging Ooze. Nelson has a Scourge Stag High Priest.
Yeah, and we see that Scavenging Ooze again out from Braverman, and I think when you look at this board, again, you see that the card's just not very impressive here. Braverman does have some attacks, but it's really hard to see him dealing enough damage just off these incremental creatures for this to matter.
Well, there's an Abrupt Decay to take care of the High Priest. There's a Scavenging Ooze activation. So he's going to be able to get in for 4 points of damage here, and he's certainly going to be the aggressor thus far, as he is on the play, and he's giving the beatdowns as quickly as he can. Now there's a Voice of Resurgence. Here is a Godless Shrine tapped. We're going to pass the turn back.
All right, so Brad is going to take a healthy chunk of damage from this aggressive start. So, and maybe Braverman's onto something here, where he really still likes, perhaps maybe when he's on the play, he really likes the aggression that Scavenging Ooze lets him have. As we see, the Ooze is going to get in for 3, 6, maybe even 9 damage before it gets stopped, which does really decrease the amount of Blood Artisting and other tricks that Braverman needs to do to get lethal across.
So another 3 points of damage there from the Ooze. Now he's going to follow up with a Doomed Traveler and a Verl's the Scar Strike. So he is just curving out very, very well. This game is Braverman, making things pretty difficult on Nelson. As Nelson's going to play a Overgrown 2. He's going to play a Cartel Aristocrat. And looks like he might pass, representing a Tragic Slip here, Matthias.
Yeah, well, the scary thing that Brad has to be aware of is that with 1 more land, Braverman has Township activations coming.
And that land looked like it just came off the top in the form of a Temple Garden. So Braverman more than happy to take 2 to be able to add 4 points of damage to his board incrementally. 1 card left. He's got basically all of his cards on the table, but it sure is nice to have a spell land in the form of Gabby Township.
Yeah, well, when you're up on creatures and you start townshipping, the Junk Aristocrats deck has very few answers to this sort of board state. It doesn't have a true sweeper. So once Braverman starts, once he gets this 3rd Township activation off, as long as he has more creatures, it's really hard for him to lose from that point.
But now this is what separates a good Junk Aristocrats player from a great one. How do you use your resources here? How do you use that barrels? When do you sacrifice with those Doom Travelers? When's it time to start scavenging? Do you scavenge, or do you just, you know, remove to scavenging use and make him be one big threat? That's what separates the good ones from the great ones, and we'll see how Braverman wants to use these cards and these interactions to try to get this game over with, as now we see a Lingering Souls plus a flashback here from Braverman, so he's got a lot of things on the board now.
One I'm curious to see is whether or not, if Braverman on his end step is going to make 2 more Spirit tokens. I think he does. You know, he threatens to make 2 Spirit tokens 5 and 6, untap and township his team. That's 12 damage. Brad would need 2 flying blockers just to stay alive, which he has 0 of.
And Nelson comes to the exact same conclusion that you do. Braverman's going to take down game number 2 off the back of a very, very aggressive start. So this Junk Aristocrats mirror is evened up now, and Brad Nelson is going to be on the play for game number 3. As you see Nelson shuffling very quickly, happy with his configuration. Braverman going back to his sideboard. Maybe he saw something that tipped him off from Nelson. Maybe he's just not happy with the way that he sideboarded, but Brad goes back to shuffling very fast.
Well, one thing that I like that Braverman might be doing was that scavenging ooze. He might be playing it differently based on whether or not he's on the play or draw.
Okay.
We saw there that actually the card, you know, it got across for 6 damage. That's a very fine card if that's what it did. I think in the end, what got him that win was Lingering Souls plus Gavany Township.
Oh, yeah.
I think if he has nothing else, that's still probably enough for him to win.
I definitely agree with you. You know, at the end of the day, you know, he was able to get in some points of damage. Abrupt Decay at Skirt Stack High Priest, keep that underneath control. But that Gavany Township and that Lingering Souls, that's just going to seal the deal. Right. And you have to be able to control that in this mirror match.
So on the play, his Scavenging Ooze deals 6, which is pretty good. But that's probably the best case scenario for Scavenging Ooze. On the draw, you probably aren't getting any more than 3 damage off it, and then you're getting a blocker. And I think that really weakens the card.
I'm inclined to agree with you. I think it certainly can be good on the play, as you mentioned, and we just saw it demonstrated right there. You know, on the draw, it is going to be a little bit slower. Things are going to get gummed up a little bit more. Voice of Resurgence can do a little bit of chump blocking, what have you.
Right. So we may see, and Brad actually is revisiting his sideboard now too.
Okay.
So a lot of times, I think that's one of the things, when I talk about one of the arts in Magic that I think is still underdeveloped. You know, I think deck lists have gotten a lot better, you know, ever since in the last 5 years. I would say sideboarding is still like the last big mystery for a lot of high-level players.
It's a very, very difficult art to accomplish. I certainly know that it's difficult for me. I try to come into every tournament with a game plan for how I want to sideboard in prospective matchups, what I want in, what I want out. But by doing that, it leaves me in a difficult situation to actually be able to adjust on the fly. Or if you're playing in something that you're not familiar with, sideboarding can be very difficult.
Right, and especially what a lot of players, you know, I was talking about the difference between sideboarding on the play versus draw. That's just another element of sideboarding I think a lot of players I don't think do, actually, to be honest.
I agree with you. I think it's a world of difference when you're on the play and on the draw. The games are entirely different. Your role assessment may be different here, where, you know, Nelson's on the play this game, so he may get to be, the aggressor, where the last game Braverman was the aggressor. So maybe in this particular matchup, you know, the person who's on the play actually gets to give the beatdowns a little bit. Gets to leverage those Lingering Souls, gets to leverage a Gavany Township, and we don't run into the board stall that we ran into on game 1.
Yeah, so what I'm inclined to think of looking at the matchup is that it's not so much about aggression, even though like that's important. It seems that it's coming down to who can do the biggest unanswerable thing the fastest.
Sure.
You know, whether it's activating a township when you have more creatures in play, and which I think that it's really just more creatures plus township is one way to win. You know, Blood Artist advantage. There's a couple ways to leverage this. Skurstock High Priest advantage would be another one. And you really want to have a hand that can do one of those. You don't want a hand that's just like a bunch of Voice of Resurgences. That's probably, doesn't seem to be what you're looking for here.
So Nelson is going to keep his hand. He's going to start off with a Buddy Land in Woodland Cemetery. So we'll see if he has any duels in his hand or if he's very slow. As Braverman's going to start off taking 2 via Temple Garden. Here comes the Doom Traveler. Nelson going to draw a Lingering Souls for the turn. There's a Swamp, and there is the Skirt Stack High Priest. 1 card to leverage in this matchup, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and of note, Brad's on the play now. It looks like he also has Scavenging Ooze now in his configuration, so that's I think that's in his hand.
Braverman with a Skirt Stack High Priest of his own passes back with the Doom Traveler. So does he have a sacrifice outlet to be able to start making demons?
No, I don't think he has the white mana source. I think he has the sacrifice outlet. I think he has the God Draw minus the white source.
Okay.
So interesting enough, this is not the first time these 2 players have faced. We're learning. was it Michael Braverman actually won an elite invitational qualifier to get here in Durham. And the more interesting thing is, to win that elite IQ, he beat Brad Nelson in the finals of that tournament.
It's a little rematch. Maybe they had a Junk Aristocrats mirror down there for this one.
Very possibly.
Nelson looking for revenge, getting in there with the Skirt Stack High Priest, has a Scavenging Ooze, and it does look like he does not have the white mana, as you mentioned. So now Braverman gets to untap, he gets to draw, and does he have a Varels? Does he have a Cartel Aristocrat?
Any sack outlet, and this is going to be real bad news for Brad Nelson.
You see Isolated Chapel there in Braverman's hand. He's also got a Lingering Souls, so he's off to a pretty good start.
A Lingering Souls, he has a Voice of Resurgence. It does not look like he has the sack outlet. So each player, what the draw they went for were these Skirt Stack High Priest draws. And it looks like both of them are missing one of those cards.
And this is a great attack here by Braverman, because what he gets to do here is he gets to attack in the Scavenging Ooze with Doom Traveler, daring Nelson to block. If Nelson does block, the Morbid on Skirt Stack High Priest
crazy to block.
Yeah, it is on. If he blocks, he is going to block. Wow.
I am surprised by that block.
As am I.
Now any 2-drop, and you have to think a player like Brad is aware of what he's doing here. You know, it's not like he forgot that Michael can just play a creature and make a 5/5 now.
Now Lingering Souls comes in 2 spirits. You see him immediately tap with the High Priest. Gonna put a 5/5 demon into play, and I'm with you. I'm very, very surprised to see Nelson make that block, because he's gonna untap. He's gonna draw his card. Let's see if he can find a white mana source.
I don't think he finds any mana
Aristocrat.
All his cards are white right now. I'd love to hear from Brad. I'm surprised by the block last time.
As am I. I am truly surprised by that block there from Nelson, knowing that Braverman can easily make a demon token. A lot would have to go wrong for Braverman not to be able to make a demon token.
He'd have to have no creatures in his hand.
Yeah.
Which, if Braverman does have no creatures in his hand, then Brad wins with the other line too.
So Braverman going to tap 2 mana. There's a Voice of Resurgence to start the show. He's going to follow that up with a Blood Artiste, paint a beautiful picture.
Well, now Braverman has established control on all 3 of the fronts we're talking about. He has Skirt Stack High Priest advantage, he has Blood Artist advantage, and he has creature number advantage. Those seem like the 3 things that matter in this matchup, and Braverman has all of them.
Nelson going to untap. He's going to draw his card.
Another white spell.
Another Cartel Aristocrat. You see a handful of white cards, and you see him extend the hand. So Michael Braverman wins the Junk Aristocrats mirror, defeating arguably the best Junk Aristocrats player in the world to move on to 7-1-1. Brad Nelson moves down to 7-2. Impressive play from Braverman.
Yeah, well, really what he did is, I think, he had solid game plans. He executed them. Even the first game, he was very close to getting. Brad kept one of those boomer bust hands that third game, where if it gets there, it's great. If it doesn't get there, it loses. I think he was aware of the risk, went for it, and he didn't get it. And
you see a little bit of frustration as Nelson is de-sideboarding here. Maybe unhappy with his keep, maybe unhappy with his block. We're not quite sure. But Braverman bests him again, first an Elite Invitational qualifier, which qualified him for this tournament, saying, hey, I can take care of you in the real thing too.
Yeah.